So good evening, everybody. Thank you, thank you. I just wanted to make sure you're all there. Happy everybody made it out tonight. I'm happy that you did whatever you had to do to get here, drop off kids, leave work early, whatever you had to do. Thank you for being here. My name is Anne Meadowake, and I co-host CBC News Toronto here in the city. We always like to tell people, 5 o'clock, Chatham 6, don't forget. And if you're not home, we're on cbc.ca, so there's no excuse not to see us. I'm really happy to be here tonight for a couple of reasons. One, I'm looking forward to hearing our speaker. I'm also looking forward to getting a chance to network with you. And I'm really excited to get away from my kids' Halloween candy, because they keep eating it, especially the Kit Kats. They're bad news. And also because the last event that I was at, it was a charity event. And Magna was the gracious sponsor for the evening. It was raising money for disadvantaged youth in Toronto, helping them get through high school. And at the point of the evening, I was supposed to do the big thank you. I said, and now I would like to spank our major sponsor. So it was all bankers, so they all got a big kick out of that. Some of those bankers really like that. One guy came up to me afterwards, he goes, you know, if you put the spanking in the silent auction, I'll bid on it. I'm like, dude, 50 Shades of Grey, it's just a book. It's not real. Anyway, I just want to quickly remind everybody, if you could put your phones on silent. But we do encourage tweeting tonight, and our hashtag for tonight, if you don't know it already, is Young WOI, Young Women of Influence. Young WOI, hashtag anything great you hear tonight, wonderful people you've met tonight, and when you're networking, make sure you get each other's Twitter handles and tweet away. Before we get started, I'd like you to join me in welcoming Women of Influence President and CEO to the stage for a very special announcement, Carolyn Lawrence.
Thank you. I am here to very briefly tell you something very exciting. My name is Carolyn. I'm the president of Women of Influence, and for those of you who don't know me, I am so passionate about providing access to role models to you to advance your careers. And as a result, if you have not already seen, this is a subscription card for each of you to receive a free, complimentary, annual subscription to the Women of Influence magazine. Could not be easier. We just need your email address. So that's our gift to you to advance your careers. I hope you have a great time tonight.
Who doesn't like free stuff? This is great. Before we get started, I just want to quickly thank our program's sponsors, thank not spank them, who have made this series possible. They are great sponsors. They continue to support every event that we do here, and so we want to just call them out briefly. Scotiabank, who is our title sponsor tonight, Anne Klein, the Cambridge Group of Clubs, Queen's School of Business, and there's details about their upcoming more free stuff, webinars, and those are in your gift bags. Shoppers Drug Mart, the National Post, Kids and Company, and Fresh Wine, and they supplied our wines for tonight from our cocktails. So the Gewürztraminer Riesling, I practiced that, I'm glad it came out, and our Cabernet Gamay. So thanks everybody for your sponsorship for tonight. There's also some incredible door prizes, and Caroline, thank you. I know that your team worked so hard to make it a really fun night for everybody, and this is part of the fun. There are 2 Cineplex Scene movie gift bags. They are filled with goodies and passes. 2 people will get a chance to win those. From the Queen's School of Business, there's a stylish bag that has business accessories. From the National Post, there's a bit of swag of some of their product there. From Shoppers Drug Mart, a beauty basket that has cosmetics, skincare, and fragrance. If you win it, please use it. Don't leave it in the guest room. Don't leave it in your closet. Make sure you take the products out and use them. From Anne Klein, there's also another swag bag. And from the Cambridge Group of Clubs, there are 3 separate prizes. A private yoga session at the Toronto Athletic Club, a breakfast for 2 at Stratus Restaurant, and a 1-month membership to the Adelaide Club. So some great prizes. You do have to stay until the very end to claim them. If we call your name and you're not here, we pull another name. If you haven't had a chance to fill out the ballot in your gift bag, this is the ballot? Yes. The ballot in your gift bag, take a moment to do so. There's 2 questions on the back. That's all you have to do is fill them out. You'll have your chance to win 2 tickets to an upcoming Young Women event, and the Women of Influence representatives are going to collect them later this evening. So it looks like this. And the format, really briefly for you this evening, begins with a presentation by Anne Fitzgerald, who is the Chief Legal Officer at Cineplex. After that presentation, we're going to do a 15-minute Q&A. If you think of something while Anne is speaking, please jot it down. And then we're going to move into a networking and connecting activity so that you can meet other women like yourselves, meet other women in different roles, and to learn from each other. We're going to give out the door prizes after that. If you were tweeting again, just a reminder, hashtag, anybody remember? Young, WOI, Young Women of Influence. And now, I'm going to invite Lisa Hartley, who's the Director and Head Brand and Media Strategy for Scotiabank, to the podium, and she will introduce our speaker tonight. Have a great time, ladies, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, and welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to welcome you tonight to the Young Women of Influence session and introduce this evening's speaker. I'm Lisa Hartley, Director and Head, Brand and Media Strategy at Scotiabank. And we're a proud sponsor of the Young Women of Influence series. Our partnership stems from a shared commitment to the advancement of women in the workplace, an initiative that is a priority for our bank as we develop employees at all levels of the organization. At Scotiabank, we support women in their careers and encourage opportunities that enable all of our employees to achieve their full potential. I'm pleased to introduce our featured guest this evening, Anne Fitzgerald, Chief Legal Officer of Cineplex. Anne oversees all legal, corporate governance, and government relations issues for Cineplex, Inc. She joined the company in 2004 to direct the acquisition of Famous Players, which made Cineplex the largest theatre exhibition company in Canada. Since that time, she has directed multiple acquisitions and divestitures, public offerings, credit arrangements, and litigation matters. As a member of the Cineplex executive team, she's heavily involved in business matters, including the creation of the Scene Loyalty Program, an initiative that is very dear to our hearts at Scotiabank, the development of the Metropolitan Opera alternative programming series, the Cineplex Store, and the development of captioning and descriptive technologies to make movies accessible to the hearing and visually impaired. She was also instrumental in the passage of Canada's anti-camcording legislation. Anne has been practicing law since 1990 in the areas of commercial and criminal litigation and corporate securities and entertainment in locations including North Carolina, Illinois, New York, and Ontario. She spent a number of years in business before beginning her commercial litigation practice and eventually left the large firm environment to pursue litigation as a criminal prosecutor with a focus in domestic homicide. In addition to practicing law, Anne has produced theater in the US and Canada, taught leadership theory for Duke University, and has twice been a finalist for the National Post ZSA General Counsel of the Year Awards. Anne holds an undergraduate degree and Juris Doctorate from Duke University and attended the Harvard University Kennedy School of Business for Leadership Studies. She also has the ICDD designation from the Institute of Corporate Directors, managed by the University of Toronto Rotman School of Business. And with that, I would like to welcome our speaker and turn it over to Anne. Thank you.
I'm a lot older than I look. With that, it just sounds like ancient. So welcome everybody tonight. Lisa, thank you for that very kind introduction. And thank you to all the participating sponsors, especially Scotiabank, for sponsoring this series and tonight. In that introduction, Lisa did not tell you the full story of me. There's parts of my history that are less than glamorous. Similarly, in negotiating, you don't always want to lay the good facts with the bad facts on the table. Negotiation is about putting your best foot forward. There are always more facts that could be told, and there's generally more than one way to tell a story, and that story can still be true. For example, I limp occasionally. I have a bad ankle. People often ask how I hurt myself. I answer that question by telling a truth. I was trekking across the Australian outback in 1986 and either broke or severely strained my ankle. And then I had to walk on it for another 100 miles with about a 60-pound backpack with a splint made out of tree limbs. That is all true. After I tell that story, people ask, what were you doing in the middle of nowhere in Australia? And I can engage them for hours in stories about the endangered mallee fowl or trekking, acacia burns or mud mapping shipwrecks or something like that, some of the work that I did there for the year that I was in Australia. What happens after that is no one ever asks me. They don't repeat the question. They don't say, how did you break your ankle? They're more interested in the story that I'm telling them. I did not answer how I broke my ankle. I answered where I broke my ankle. If I were telling them the full story, I would have to tell them more facts. But that's not the picture I want to leave of myself. The picture I want to leave of myself is that I'm adventurous and determined and strong. That story that I told leaves with that impression. The story that I did not tell is the rest of the truth. And that's how I broke my ankle. I was sleeping in a tent and got up in the middle of the night because I had to relieve myself and tripped over a root and slammed my ankle into a tree. So that's the rest of the truth. And if I tell just that part of the story, people aren't really seeing me as adventurous, they're seeing me as a klutz. That is also true, but it's not a story that I need out there for everyone to tell. And I do know that the CBC is taping this, so if you would please respect some of the embarrassing stories in my life and not present those, that would be great. Storytelling is about keeping the listener engaged and focused on the version of the story that you want told. Negotiation is not very different. In negotiation, some details of a story may not support your argument. The very basic rule is not to offer up more than you need to offer. In negotiation, it is critical to know your audience, know your counterparty, know what truth it is that will convince them to buy into the story that you want them to hear. That's the basis of any negotiation, including negotiating your own career. Negotiating the Famous Players deal was particularly thrilling for me, that we were repeatedly, as a company, we were told that there was no way the Competition Bureau would ever approve Cineplex acquiring their largest competitor, that being Famous Players. At the time that we started the deal, Cineplex had approximately 35% national market share in film exhibition. I assume everybody here has some idea about what Cineplex does. I'm just going out on a limb thinking movies. At the time, Famous Players had about 40% market share. So combined, we were at 75% market share. The deal involved a significant amount of negotiation with the Bureau, as well as with Viacom, who is the parent of Famous Players. We worked arduously for months to convince the Bureau and to educate them on our perception of competition in the film exhibition industry. Cineplex strongly believes that we're competing for our customers' leisure time and dollars, no matter where they choose to spend them. Certainly we compete with DVDs and other home video options like Netflix and Hulu. In the end, the Bureau did not entirely agree with our arguments, but we were able to negotiate a divestiture resolution that allowed Cineplex to retain 68% national market share and to thrive in the years since. We have since diversified our business model such that we are well positioned for the future as people's movie consumption habits evolve with evolving technologies. Each deal on which I work with Cineplex requires a solid grasp of negotiation, and that process always has its challenges. However, it's often a lot more difficult to manage negotiations in our personal lives than it is our professional ones. Personal negotiations, by their very nature, involve emotions, and emotions cloud our objectivity. When I have to manage personal negotiations, I try really hard to limit the emotional context by thinking about the person with whom I'm negotiating as my partner and thinking about the matter about which we're negotiating as an object. I try to think of engaging the other person to find a solution that works for both of us. While some professional negotiations that I've managed may be of interest to a number of people in this room, not all of them are, and I've been asked to speak tonight more about negotiating on my own career, which has been, as you heard, a little unusual and slightly varied. It may be that some of you in the room are in the midst of a career change. It may be that you are incredibly happy with what you are currently doing. But the reality is that everybody in this room will change from what they are currently doing at some point. At some point, life changes around us, even if we are not seeking change. Things happen. Companies downsize or restructure. People divorce. Our partner's job moves us to another city. Our parents age. We have children. Most important life changes require a negotiation process. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, quitters never win and winners never quit. I do not believe that's true. Had I not quit my job as a young lawyer in Raleigh, North Carolina, I would have missed some extraordinary life experiences, and I would certainly not be living in Canada, married to the most wonderful man I've ever known, who's sitting in the back row and not happy about my pointing him out. And working in a job that is fulfilling, challenging, and lucrative. I love where I am and cannot regret any of the bad decisions that I made along the way. Speaking of bad decisions, I married my college sweetheart at 20 years old. That is simply a bad idea. I made my law school choices and my initial career decisions based on where his job was based. Now, frankly, there's nothing wrong with the guy, but you shouldn't get married at 20. At least I shouldn't. I began my law practice 22 years ago as a commercial litigator in a large North Carolina firm. There were 103 lawyers, which included 3 women lawyers. I was learning on a daily basis and doing challenging work. I was well entrenched in my North Carolina life, where the whole of my family had been for many, many generations. I was doing exactly what was expected of me, and thus what I expected of myself. After a couple years with the law firm, I found the work no longer to be emotionally engaging. And even though it was still intellectually challenging, I was a corporate commercial lawyer who never saw, corporate commercial litigator, who never saw the inside of a courtroom. As the vast majority of commercial cases settle, and let's face it, as a young lawyer, I don't know how many lawyers there are in the room, but as a young lawyer, you're sitting in a room reviewing discovery documents and doing legal research for the most part. I was bored with my career and not remotely emotionally connected to the man to whom I was married. I was pretty much sleepwalking through my life. While my job dissatisfaction was growing, although unrelated, my marriage had also been deteriorating. In the end, it was a simple, casual comment made by my husband's younger brother that was really the turning point that led to my quitting both my job and my 7-year marriage. The decline had been slow, and I knew deep in my soul of my own failure. It was one of those great sadnesses that you just carry around in your throat. So when I say it was a simple, casual comment, I don't mean that it was sudden or that I made the decision simply or casually. My point is that your ultimate decision to negotiate your way from one place to another may be the result of the smallest thing, a chance encounter. It's only in hindsight that you recognize that moment that allowed you to see a new solution for yourself. Later you look back, you realize, oh, that was the moment. That was it. That was the pivot point around which my entire life turned and spun in a completely different direction. That was the moment when I had the courage to change where I was. I quit my lucrative job, quit my surgeon husband, quit my hometown, and I quit my state. I was terrified and euphoric at the same time. Quitting euphoria is kind of an incredible thing. It's like a drug. It's like you fall in love with your decision. It's like you feel so good about that, and you're terrified at exactly the same time. Quitting that first time eventually completely changed my view of the world, all for the better. That next step in my life was my first major career negotiation, and the first time I ever spent time thinking about what I actually wanted for myself. At that point in my life, I didn't know a great deal about either negotiation or change management, and I certainly could have handled that change process better than I actually did, so nobody needs to hear those details. Instead of thinking strategically about the change I needed, I jumped at an excuse for change. I was asked to lead a youth leadership development expedition in a remote area of Alaska, which is perfectly normal, right? Everybody gets that invitation. I agreed because I wanted to get back outdoors, but mostly because it was a legitimate excuse for me to take a break from my life and my husband. I was doing a charitable good thing. It's easy to convince people, oh, I need to make this change when it's all about doing good in the world. What I really needed was a break from my husband for a few months and my job to really think about what I wanted. I didn't conduct any kind of organized self-analysis, but I talked with friends and colleagues about the passion that I was missing both in my work and in my life. I was finally able to voice that I wanted to do something that mattered. I wanted to do something completely out of my comfort zone. I wanted to feel alive and I wanted to feel challenged. I needed my work to make a difference. I had to step out of my everyday norm to even find that voice for myself. Had I just tried to think through my marriage while continuing in my job, I'm not sure that I would have had the clarity to make the same decisions. Other people may be better at that. That wasn't my gift at the time. Doing something I really loved by getting back into the wild allowed me to feel more like myself and to make more clear choices. From this first quit, in hindsight, I have two takeaways. First, nothing lasts forever. There is nothing that you can do that you can keep doing forever. Period. End of story. Second, since the human soul requires engagement in something, meaning you have to be doing something big or small, it's better to willfully quit and move on to the next thing than to just sleepwalk through life. Both my decision to divorce and my decision to become a criminal prosecutor came as a surprise to virtually everyone who knew me. As I appeared perfectly happily married, and I could have chosen any large reputable firm that I wanted, the fact that I chose to go to a very small community was even more surprising, as I had no friends or family and certainly would not have the status that comes from prosecuting in a big city office. When the position opened up, I jumped at the opportunity to be paid very little for very difficult work. I want to share a bit of this work with you because it came to define me for the next many years. And it helps me explain what I eventually learned about strategically negotiating my own career, which hopefully can help you manage yours. I moved to a small town on the outskirts of Fort Bragg Army Base that houses the U.S. Special Forces and the 101st Airborne. Due to the location dead between New York City and Miami, there's a large drug problem. Due to the low level of education and the high level of poverty in the civil community and the fact that there was a military community in the same area, there was a great deal of violence and a high murder rate. While these are generally not factors that attract people to move to an area, as a young prosecutor, I would be in the courtroom all day, every day. I would be trying serious felonies from day one. Over the course of the next few years, I conducted hundreds of bench trials and dozens of jury trials. I was gaining more experience and exposure than I would ever have in a big city office. The most important case ever assigned to me came when I was 28 years old and changed how I saw myself professionally. I was given my first-degree murder case as a way to learn how to try a murder. The elected DA had tried to settle this case to no avail, and she was not willing to try it because she didn't want the loss on her own record. It was deemed to be a case that no one could win at trial. As such, it was assigned to me simply as a means to learn. There was really nothing to lose. I couldn't screw it up. Here are the basic facts of the case. 2 years prior to my being given the case, a Special Forces Army officer was charged with murdering his wife. There were 2 witnesses to her death, and they were her 5- and 8-year-old sons. At the time of her murder, they were 5 and 8. Their evidence supported the defense entirely. They both agreed that their mother, Beth, threatened to kill their stepfather around 7 p.m. She put her gun in her bedside table around 9 p.m. and went to sleep. Around midnight, the husband, Eric, came home and woke her up. The boys saw them arguing in the bedroom with Beth on her side of the bed. Eric then shut the bedroom door, and the boys heard the adults continue to argue. The boys then heard 2 sounds, but they could not say which one came first. They heard the gun go off, and they heard Eric scream, "No, Beth, no." With that evidence, my chance of winning any conviction was slim to none. The chance of getting a first-degree conviction was non-existent. We reopened the investigation, and I worked with one small-town sheriff's deputy. We learned that the victim, Beth, was Eric's fourth wife, and that there were two other wives who had died in his presence. The third wife was missing. The first wife died of a gunshot wound from an apparent accidental shooting 21 years prior to Beth dying. The second wife appeared to have committed suicide by asphyxiation in Nevada about 15 years prior. In this early internet age, there was no interstate database from which we could research all of these old cases. Over the next 4 years, I spent the vast majority of my time working on this case, in addition to managing a full regular caseload. When I began my opening statement to the jury, I remember being so terrified that I was physically shaking. I was terrified to lose, as I knew just how evil of a person this defendant was. I was also terrified of my competition, as Eric's lawyer was one of the most experienced and respected criminal defense attorneys in the state, and this was my first murder trial. In the end, the jury convicted Eric Murillo of first-degree murder. The evidence that we were able to mount against him was overwhelming. It was clear that he planned and intended to kill Beth after she suffered years of horrible abuse. From that one case, I grew to internalize, I really grew to feel that I could do anything that I set my mind to do for which I prepared. And I learned that believing in your own argument greatly affects how your argument will be received. This belief in your position matters a great deal in any negotiation. A belief in yourself matters even more in your personal negotiations. To finish a long story, as a result of that case, I ended up becoming recognized as an expert in multiple domestic homicides, abusive relationships, and child sexual assaults. All fun stuff. These are not the most pleasant issues to have to deal with on a daily basis, and eventually they exact an emotional toll on you. But for the years that I did this work, I found it to be engaging, and I felt a great deal of value in guiding victims through what was the hardest thing they had ever encountered. Eventually, though, I needed a change, both from my work and from another failed relationship. One afternoon, I had a chance encounter with an old professor of mine from Duke, with whom I had not spoken in years. We went for a coffee, and I spoke of my need to take a break from prosecution while I thought about what my next big professional move would be. It was a casual conversation, and again opened a door for me to see a new version of my life. That was the moment when I again had courage to change. This professor was running a, quote, study abroad program for Duke University students. Duke is in North Carolina, if you don't know, and running this program in New York City, teaching leadership using the New York arts scene as the teaching forum. I had studied leadership theory at Harvard and had worked with youth leadership programs for a number of years. In about 1 month's time, I quit and moved to New York to manage the program and teach leadership theory and criminal litigation. My professor and I worked together to create this position, with my intending it to be a short break from prosecuting. I would use this time to think about what my real career move would be. Both Alaska and New York allowed me time to re-engage with myself, to really think about what I needed, but for different reasons. With my move to Alaska, I needed to quit sleepwalking through my life. With my move to New York, I needed to quit the culture of violence. I needed a change from emotional overdrive. It turned out I loved New York. I loved my job, and after a year, I had no intentions of ever leaving that city. Spectacular place to live. I began to build a new professional reputation, develop a new circle of friends, reconnect with old friends, all of whom were far less judgmental about my failed relationships than I was. I loved my new, unexpected life. However, as I stated earlier, nothing lasts forever. In March 2001, I met this Canadian guy on a blind date, another chance encounter. I told him on our second date that I would never get married again. I broke up with him on our third date as he was planning to move back to Canada, and I had no intentions of ever leaving New York. Within a year, we were married. Again, my best laid plans did not last forever, but this unanticipated change opened my life to spectacular opportunities. It was also the first time I ever strategically negotiated a move in my own career with substantial help from Ian. In moving to Canada, I quit my country and quit both a city and a job that I loved. When I moved here in March 2002, I knew only one human being in this country, and I had to figure out how to start over. I waited 18 months for a work permit. While that time was a blessing in the end, Trust me, I did not see it that way. I did not see it as a gift at the time. I was terrified that I'd made a great professional mistake. Fortunately, by the time I made this latest quit, I actually knew a lot more about negotiation and change management. The backstory I've just provided was a bit long-winded, but as relevant as I want to share with you these next points about negotiating your own career change. While each of my past jobs may seem wholly unrelated, they are not. I now use the skills from every past job in my current job. Those skills make me better at what I do today. During the 18 months while I waited for a work permit, I put into place a deliberate strategic plan towards understanding how my divergent past could be applied towards the ideal job for me. Career transition really requires a three-part process. First, self-discovery. Second, assessing your own skills, interests, and limitations. And third, actually doing a strategic plan for a job hunt. Self-discovery really means taking time to think about you and what you want and who you are. You know yourself better than anybody else in the world. Remember that. You don't need to let someone else define you. And sometimes those expectations that were bred into us are the hardest expectations to change, and they may not actually fit for you. Prior to my move to Canada, and in a large part as a result of my personal relationship failures, I'd done a great deal of self-discovery work already. But this is an ongoing process throughout our lives because we all change as we grow. For me, at that time, I knew I wanted to work with a lot of people. I loved the practice of law as it affords intellectual challenge, and I didn't want to be a specialist. I preferred the financial security of a steady paycheck over the risk of managing any of my own private firm or business. Before and during law school, I'd run a couple of successful businesses with some friends, and I really loved focusing on that collective goal, but I did not enjoy the financial risk of that. With these criteria, in-house counsel was a great option for me as there was only one client. I'd be practicing law as a generalist. I thought that was wonderful. But there were also many other business or legal positions with mid-size or large companies or government positions that would also fit. So the criteria that I've already noted wasn't really enough for me to focus my job search. I had to do more work. So I needed to determine how my skills were transferable. I didn't want to work as a criminal prosecutor or a teacher or an expedition guide. I hired a professional coach to help me with this process. While I knew I had some talent, I couldn't see how my skills would apply to a new environment. I learned that virtually everything we do is transferable. For example, the ability to argue to a jury is no different than making a sales pitch or lobbying for a change with government. The ability to teach requires that you have the emotional intelligence to manage people. I spent a lot of time writing down my successes and determining what skills I'd had that made those successes happen. I spoke with family and close friends and colleagues. They were able to see skills in me that I would have never even identified as skills. One phrase the consultant told me really resonated with me. He said that Mozart never understood why everybody could not compose music because it was so innate to him. All of us have things that are innate to us that we don't say, oh, that's a skill that I've developed, because it's just who you are. Defining my interest and limitations further helped me identify realistic opportunities. I wanted to be in Toronto, but was willing to travel. I preferred to be downtown, but was willing to commute a little bit. My time was flexible. I could work long hours. It's important to know all these factors before you start actively working towards a particular job. If you end up in a job that doesn't work for you or for your employer, that's really a failed negotiation. The point of a negotiation is to arrive at a mutual decision by which both parties are engaged to commit to the future relationship. In the end, I decided that working as in-house counsel in an entertainment company based in Toronto was the ideal role for me. Great decision, but given the marketplace, this was a fairly limiting decision. But it did focus my job search. Knowing my goal let me tailor my story and tailor my resume to that search. The next step was finding the job. That process was not easy at all, and not without fear and not without a few tears. In negotiation terms, I knew what I was selling, I knew what I was willing to accept to achieve the ends I desired, but it was definitely difficult to sell myself as being immensely qualified to do something I had never done before. From a recent legal career perspective, I was a criminal litigator who wanted to become an in-house corporate commercial lawyer. The corporate work that I had done in my early career was now a long time in the past, and it was in another country. I was not a square peg that would easily fit into a square hole. I want to share with you a shocking statistic. 90% of all jobs in North America at a senior level are found through networking. 90%. This means you have to learn to network to be successful. Networking is not a negative word. Networking is planned, purposeful, and ongoing. It's not manipulative, and it's not asking for a job. You're networking tonight, and hopefully you're enjoying yourselves at the same time. One of the reasons that most jobs are found through networking is a result of how companies hire for positions. If a company is advertising a position, they are already a long way down the path of career change or corporate culture change. They've spent a lot of time thinking about what their needs are and who might fit in that role. It is very likely that there's already a long list of potential candidates, both inside the company and external to the company, once a position is advertised. In other words, by the time a job is posted, there is already a lot of competition. If you're able to meet with decision makers at a time when there is no present job available, but change may happen soon, that is the ideal time to voice your interest in a position. You were the first candidate. When you're the first candidate, you have more control over the process of a job opportunity. For example, when I had coffee with my Duke professor, that conversation provided an unexpected opportunity to create a new position, for which I was the first candidate. People network differently, and there are all sorts of ways you can do so depending on where you are in your own career. You can attend or speak at conferences, right, for trade journalists, join organizations, volunteer, do contract work. Be creative in seeking these opportunities. I undertook an organized and active networking process when I was looking for my particular job. Effectively, I lunched. I lunched a lot. I have my job today because I ate and paid for a lot of lunch. I did one thing that really mattered in each one of these meetings. I asked every person with whom I met to introduce me to someone else. Eventually, I met the right person for the right job for me. Most people are more than happy to give you 15 minutes to help you out with your own path discovery. It may be that they have their own agenda, but generally they don't. Most successful people realize that they did not get to where they are entirely on their own, and they're happy to open a door and give you a few minutes to talk about their process and their path. Do not be afraid to call people and ask them for a few minutes of their time. The first time I met with someone from Cineplex, the company had no in-house counsel, and they did not intend to create a legal team or even hire one in-house lawyer. I convinced them to use me as external counsel for a small deal. The successful execution of that deal led to my being contracted for the Famous Players deal. That eventually led to my position today, supported by a fantastic 9-person in-house team that I've built in the ensuing years. I took a risk that a small contract would open more opportunities for me. And then when Cineplex decided they wanted to create an in-house role, I was the first candidate. And after that initial contract, I had spent enough time with the senior leadership at Cineplex to have the emotional intelligence to know what skills they were looking for and what they most valued in me. And that helped me sell myself to them to create exactly the job that I had been trying to create. In the end, my job search with Cineplex was simply a very long negotiation with a successful result. Whatever your goal, you're going to have to believe in yourself potentially more than you do today. Studies show that compared to men, women underestimate their performance. If you ask men and women questions about completely objective criteria, such as GPAs or sales results, men get it wrong slightly high. Women get it wrong slightly low. More importantly, if you ask men why they succeeded, they attribute their success to themselves. Women attribute their success to other factors like luck or receiving help from others. Ask a woman why she did well on something, and she'll say, I got lucky and all these great people helped me, and they'll give credit to everybody else in the room. Ask a man and he'll say or think, what a dumb question, I'm awesome. Women need to take a page from men and own their own successes. So if you're successful, quit saying you're lucky. You've worked hard, you've excelled, and you've made good decisions. This is not luck. And if you've made some bad decisions along the way and still have achieved success, that isn't luck either. It's demonstrating an aptitude for adaptation, problem solving, and learning from your mistakes. This is not to say that luck doesn't have something to do with where any of us are. I was born in North America to a loving, middle-class, well-educated family. That let me start life on second base, and I would never claim that I hit a double. I, however, have made it around the other two bases on my own legs, with good coaches telling me to run on. Women in virtually all professions have come a very long way since I began practicing law, And the path that my predecessors paved was no doubt very challenging. I'm thankful to all of those women, but we are not yet there. Of 190 heads of state, only 8 are women. Women currently hold 3.8% of Fortune 500 CEO positions. Women's representation in Fortune 500 leadership positions has stagnated in recent years, increasing less than 1% over 2 years, growing from 13.5% in 2009 to 14.1% in 2011. In Canada, women make up 47% of the workforce, but comprise only 23% of senior management roles. Every year sees a tiny, tiny bit of improvement, and it is clear that my generation did not fix the problem. Women became 50% of college graduates in 1981, 31 years ago. 30 years is plenty of time for graduates to get to the top of their industries, but we are nowhere close to 50% of jobs at the top. You have an opportunity to change these statistics. What this really means is that in today's environment, one thing that women have going for them is that they are women. The statistics are clear that there's a lot of room at the top. And there's certainly an acknowledgement today that did not exist 20 years ago, that enterprises are more successful when women are at the table. This means this opportunity exists for you. Here's my last pearl of wisdom. If you remember nothing else from tonight, remember this. You are awesome. I'm not suggesting that you be boastful. No one likes that in a man or a woman. I am suggesting that believing in yourself is the first necessary step to achieving your own career potential and creating the happiness that works for you. As you start to think about negotiating change in your own careers, remember that quitters can win and winners can quit, and that endings are simply new beginnings. Thanks.